Hey, it's Travis. Too many camp directors run just on gut feel. Our free Resilient Camp Blueprint Diagnostic is your dashboard for resilience. Take it today at camp.mba/Travis. Again, that's camp.mba/Travis.
The world feels like it's been flipped upside down, and as it slowly starts to sort itself out and we adjust to a new normal, we have to get our bearings. Things are changing at a dizzying pace, and it can be hard to orient ourselves. Daily, we're pulled in new directions by the news, social media, our peers, friends, and family. So come, grab your compass and dig into this conversation as we discuss how to find our bearings, what grounds us, and how we're charting our path forwards.
Welcome to Beyond Camp, a podcast for summer camp directors and leaders by Go Camp Pro. Beyond Camp explores the intersection of camp and the rest of our lives. Camp professionals know that all aspects of our lives affect our camp experience, and Beyond Camp is here to dive into the messy, brave, and joyous conversations that surround that fact. Check out our show notes at gocamp.pro/beyondcamp.
Beyond Camp is brought to you by the American Camp Association, Illinois. Sending thousands of children from economically disadvantaged households to camp and providing intentional services and programs to today's diverse camp professionals is at the core of the American Camp Association, Illinois' mission. Learn more about upcoming programs by visiting acail.org.
Welcome to Beyond Camp, where we explore the intersection of camp in our lives. For too long, camp professionals have referred to camp as being in a bubble, and we are here to burst that bubble. We know that camp intersects with every aspect of our lives, and we're excited to delve into those. We are your hosts, Rachel Kent. My pronouns are she, her.
And Cassie Ploy. My pronouns are she, her as well.
And we are here to go beyond camp with you. As a reminder, please subscribe to this podcast wherever you find your favorite podcasts, and be sure to check out the show notes at gocamp.pro/beyondcamp. Now, let's get started. Last week, we rode the emotional roller coaster together. We talked about the highs and the lows and how we're working through all of those. Today, we're here to dive into where do we go from here? Does it feel like the world's your oyster, or are you feeling like you're confined to what seems to be a small industry and what sometimes can seem like a shrinking industry in a summer where nobody's hiring in the summer camp field? How do you get your bearings in a world that's constantly changing, where information is coming at you from all angles and it's hard to fact check it and figure things out? I know for me, I have some really strict strategies that I implement around the news. I love facts, so I source out good quality news, facts, not opinion pieces, and I find other people who like facts, and I can chat with them. I'm cognizant of the fact that there's lots of folks out there who don't want to delve into the facts, who are just inundated by this. And so I think it's really important that we respect those people and their boundaries, and that we ask first, like, hey, are you in a place to discuss COVID or the pandemic, before we dive into the news and just bombard them with facts, good or bad.
Yes, I really agree with that. The fact that we need to respect those boundaries, because at first I was like, just all the news, give me all the news. Just, I'm going to learn everything as much as I can. And then all of a sudden I was just like, whoa, this is too much. And I went to like essential information only, and the daily regional updates and updates from our prime minister up here as well, and stuck to that. And I found that it was easier for me to read the news than watch the news, and to really differentiate between those two, that I absorbed more and was able to have more choice in what I wanted to read versus when you're watching.
Yeah, for sure. And I found there's some great COVID data packs out there where you can see different infographics and things. We'll drop some into the show notes for you. So be sure to check those out. I find those really fascinating, a great way for me to see facts without any opinions or interpretations of those. And that's really helped me as well. Because I find, especially with social media, I have a hard time where I'm constantly seeing other people's opinions and people saying, people straight up will say the world is ending, and it just sends me sideways for a little bit. So I really like being able to see just hard numbers and data and graphs and things like that, where I can draw my own conclusions. I find boundaries for me personally around social media to be really challenging. I'm often on my phone. I'm notorious for this, just absentmindedly scrolling through Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I love to talk about living in the moment, but I also love to live on social media, apparently. So I found that really challenging during this pandemic, and I've had to really focus on taking a break and walking away, especially when I am reading things that I'm like, oh, this is inaccurate data because I've read it somewhere else, or I just really disagree with it, and realizing that there's no point in arguing about this on the internet with strangers. And sometimes I just have to put down my phone and leave.
Yeah, I found very similar to that. I found the same thing, that I was just taking in so much. I even at one point thought it would be a great idea to download TikTok. That was a learning experience. I no longer have it. But I know a lot of people who've taken social media vacations recently and just really disconnected completely, which I find really hard to do, because that's a connection point for me, which I find really important. But I've also started unsubscribing from some stuff. And also the do not disturb and the limitations that you can put on social media on all of your devices now, really helpful in like focusing attention. And, when you pick up your phone and those apps aren't lit up and the notifications aren't there, I find it a lot easier to step away from it and really remove myself from it and focus on other things, or do something more intentional with that time as well.
Yeah, I mean, like, even for you and I, we're in different time zones, so it means that I can see that you're on Do Not Disturb, so I can message you at 7 a.m. my time, which is like 4 a.m. your time, and I'm not ever worried that I'm going to wake you up, and we can work in our own little universes, which is fantastic. Something that I really struggle with in social media is when I am feeling good about things, like on a certain day, or feeling positively or excited about something, and then I got on social media and see all those, like, the world is ending, or like other things that really contradict how I'm feeling in the moment, that can really, really shake me. So when I'm feeling positively and having like a better day, sometimes I actually step away from social media, because I know that I deserve to have those feelings. And seeing those like COVID specific posts can be really challenging for me.
Yeah, those are hard. And I probably do the same. I try to unfollow some of those things as well, just that they don't affect me and I can keep on in my happy little world.
For sure. And I think in future episodes, I'm sure we'll dive more into social media. I think it's really important for social justice. And today specifically, I want to clarify that we're specifically talking about being inundated with COVID-19 facts and information, and that upsetting us, not other social justice things that are on social media. So stay tuned for an episode on that in the future, because I'd be excited to dive into that.
Yeah, let's add it to the list.
Fantastic. Something that also has been really helpful for me just in getting my bearings before I can even like make big decisions or really look at my life has been finding a really strong routine. And I didn't realize how much I needed routine until the pandemic hit. I spent the first week of the pandemic on vacation, because it was March break here in Ontario. So I was grateful we didn't book anything like to go away, but it wasn't the world's best vacation, as you can imagine. And so that week I didn't have really strong habits. Then after that, I got into them. So for me, it's getting up with the dog, it's eating regularly and moving. And as I've started my new job in the last couple of weeks, I've tried to set really intentional habits around that. So like getting up at a very specific time, starting my day by walking, and also just like fitting in movement, not specifically exercise. I'm a big CrossFit fan, but just like walks throughout the day. So I've started going for a lunchtime walk. Just like half an hour with an audiobook, really making time to get my body moving when I'm sitting all the time.
I think that's so important to mention, especially when we're quite often working from home now. It's so easy to just be like, oh, I'm sitting here and I do my work here, and then I move here and I sit and I have my meal. You can sit in a different spot. So being really intentional about those. I recently read Atomic Habits, and it had a lot around developing habits about first we do this before we do that, and kind of building it into kind of a routine structure and pulling one positive off of another. It was really good. Recommend it if it's something. You can also listen to it. It's a great audiobook.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. For me, I've been doing the same, doing a lot of walking, more unstructured, I would say, but I tend to go for a couple hours at a time if I'm walking, or do some smaller hikes. I also found that keeping my bedtime and like my sleep routine normalized was so helpful. So I tried not to stay up super late or sleep in to, until noon. I, tried to keep it at my standard typical times and tried to maintain those same 3 meals that I would have every day at, times that make sense. So eating breakfast before a certain hour and eating dinner between certain hours. It wasn't like at this time I do this, but during this time frame, I make sure I do that. But when it came for trying to like really conquer some of those tasks, I found the 3-item to-do list, or as I called it, my daily conquer list, really helpful. And I've used it off and on now, but right at the beginning, it was like, today, these 3 things are the 3 things I need to do. whether that was grocery shopping, cleaning, working on a side project, moderating on Slack, whatever it needed to be, it was on that list. And it really helped kind of fill my time and keep me accountable.
I love that. That's super important. And we'll dive into accountability a little bit later in this episode as well. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that. Something that I've been thinking about as we move towards reopening, and Cassie, you and I have discussed this before, we're both in Canada, but we're in different provinces. So we've reopened at very different stages or and paces. And so really I keep coming back to this phrase, like we're in the same storm, but in different boats. And sometimes I like see things that are happening in other parts of the country or of the world. And I'm like, do I get my hopes up? Is that okay to get my hopes up? And then also understanding that like things might be opening where I am and, you know, society might be feeling more positively about things and like we're in a healthier place. But then also understanding that as I talk to other camp pros, your other friends and family all around the world, that it's going to be different everywhere, and to be understanding of those different circumstances, even like within my small community where I live, understanding that people have different circumstances that we may not be aware of those. I think is really important as we look to move forward and sort of chart that course forward. For example, I live with some folks who are very vulnerable to COVID. So reopening for my family looks very different than it might for somebody else who's my age and like lives on their own, let's say. So when I'm making plans to do things, if I'm like, oh, do you want to go on a canoe trip or, you know, whatever it might be, keeping in mind that we're all same storm, but very different boats and being sensitive to that.
Yeah, definitely. It's been hard because like a lot of my family lives in an area that, you know, didn't see a lot of cases, if any, in their communities. And, you know, I'm going to see them in a couple of weeks, but I'm in an area that was really, really busy and has a lot of cases on a regular basis. And I've been doing my best to like only do essential errands for the last couple of weeks so that I can feel better about going to see them and, you know, making that choice that, you know, I'm going to have to stay home and stay away from people, but still managing to make sure that I'm, you know, being safe when I go out. And it really makes me think of kind of how people react to different situations and what's important to everybody. But I think like this time it's so important to express empathy in all situations because everybody is different and every area is different, and it's going to affect each of us differently as things reopen in our areas.
Oh, for sure. And it's important that we recognize as well that for our listeners here, everybody's going through this in their own way. And Cassie and I understand that, and that we're going through things differently, and so are all of you. And so we're grateful that we can all be on this journey together while recognizing that it looks very different for each of us. We've talked a lot about today sort of the things that we've used to sort of get our bearings so that we can feel more like we're on our feet and able to look at our lives and what we want to do moving forward. And we're really, really excited to dive into this conversation about our careers, about looking at where we were and where we want to go. Something that we saw on Summer Camp Pros, the Facebook page, where Cassie and I do some moderating, is people who are really worried about, oh my goodness, I'm not going to be working at camp this summer. What does this mean for my resume? What does this mean for my future? And I think for a lot of either like younger camp pros or up and coming camp pros, this is a really scary time because you had it all mapped out. You were like, okay, I'm like trying to move up. So I'm going to like have this job. Maybe it was your dream job this summer, the next step into leadership. And suddenly you don't have that. And you have this blank on your resume and you're really worried about that. And that's really challenging for folks. And I think it's important to realize that you might be wandering away from camp, but you're just taking a slightly different path. Nobody's going to look back on 2020 and be like, why didn't you work at camp this summer? Everyone's going to be like, oh, good. We all made it through 2020s together. Where are we going now? So really try to look at it as taking another path. And I'm going to recognize my privilege here in that when I lost my job, I was very grateful to not have to have a huge number of financial worries. Both because of my personal life and also because of the support of my government. So I recognize that I have that lens of privilege as I go into this conversation.
Yeah, and that would align with me as well, that same lens of privilege. I'm grateful that we have what we have here, and I recognize that it's going to be different for everybody. And, you know, I think about that blank on the resume, and I'm going to have that blank on my resume, but I feel like a lot of people are going to have that blank on their resume, and that hiring and recruitment teams are going to understand that blank on your resume exists because a lot of people have it, and that they're comfortable with that blank because, sometimes things aren't our choice on why that blank might be there. And I think it's also good to put words to it because you might be asked in a future interview about that blank, and be honest. I've been through a few interviews recently and they do ask, and I'm just like, hey, this is the circumstances. Mm-hmm. I was one of the few people, or the thousands of people, who didn't survive the pandemic in a financial and way.
Yeah, and there's no shame in that as well. And as camp folks, a lot of our organizations, they didn't make these choices to lay us off or to furlough us because we were poor employees or we weren't good enough. Mm-hmm. It just came down to the numbers. So it wasn't necessarily because of your skills. And I think it's really important that we don't feel shame in that, and that we're able to just to recognize that and, like you said, put words to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then going forward from that, it's been such a journey of figuring out what that next step is, mm-hmm. and knowing that, stepping outside of camp isn't a bad thing. It's not going to hurt your career in camp. I strongly believe that it's only going to help camp professionals be better, and to be better at what we do by seeing something else. And I've been looking at it as where are my weak points, and how can I find a job that'll help me strengthen those points and be better at something that's more on the business management side, because camp is a business in the end.
Yeah, you've done some really great research into that. So I'm really excited to hear more about that, because I know that's something that a lot of us really lack, is that we often think we're really well-rounded. And then I know for me, somebody's like, oh, can you read this part of the budget? And I'm like, oh, I should be able to. You're right. Yes, I need to learn about this. So those are important things, especially for folks who are striving to get to camp more.
Yeah. One of the articles I read was with the Harvard Business Review about reinventing your career specifically during coronavirus. And it was so interesting. And it had a lot of really great points about your skills and how you can use those to your advantage. And if you don't subscribe to the HBR daily emails, I highly recommend that as well. And we'll make sure we put the link for this in our show notes.
Yeah, Cassie got me onto those last week and I've really enjoyed them. For me, something that I realized was that I really have been leaning into my values during this time. And I didn't realize it at first. The pandemic hit, I got laid off. And so I just launched into doing certain things. And I looked around and I was like, why are other people not reacting this way? What's going on? Why is not everybody like me? And it took me a while. And then a former colleague sent a group email to a bunch of us. And at my workplace, we use the Gallup Strength Finder, which is a way of identifying your strength. It's similar to a type of a personality test. And so for me, my top 5 Gallup strengths are restorativeness, connectedness, relator, intellection, and input. By the way, if you've taken your Gallup strengths and you want to share your strengths with me, please send me an email. I'd be super curious to hear. And my colleague sent this email out. And she was like, this is how I've been using my strengths. And I realized that now that I'm able to put a name to these, I'm actually able to better understand why I need to do certain things to get me through this time. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, this makes perfect sense to me. I felt this incredible need during this crisis to connect people, to build relationships, to try and solve problems, and to really think and analyze the data in front of me. And those pieces just clicked together like a puzzle for me. And I was like, I need to do something around these sort of key values for me moving forwards.
Mm-hmm. I find when you shared that with me last week, I was like, oh, that makes perfect sense. And I went and found the values that I did through an exercise with Sarah Kurtz McKinnon a few years ago. And that was very powerful exercise. It was about 3 or 4 hours and in a large group format. But I probably have 10, but the 3 that really pop out to me from it were passion, community, and connection. So very quite similar to a lot of what Rachel was saying there. But those are the things that, when I really think back on it, those are the things that really connect me to what these past few months have been for me and where I've put my energy into maintaining what I find important. And I've also found that those are the pieces that bring me happiness and allow me to thrive.
Mm-hmm. And today, you and I are both talking about values that have drawn either from sort of like an exercise or a test or something that we've done. But folks draw their values from a whole variety of places. And there's no right or wrong place to draw your values from or to make your decisions based off of. For example, like right now, you might, as a camp pro, need to find a job because you need to eat, which is super valid and super important. And so perhaps right now, you don't have the privilege of finding a job just that like makes you happy because you need to be out there so that you have a place to live and food to eat. And that's super valid. It's super important. It's an incredibly challenging time, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I just want to make sure that we're putting that out there. It's incredibly valid to take care of your needs first and foremost. For some folks, those values are going to be driven by their family. If you have a family to support, or your family wants to move, or you need to take care of them in a certain way, and perhaps you're in a place where you can turn back to your education, and now is the time for you to enroll in some, I'm going to suggest distance learning or virtual learning, given the state of the world.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to do what you need to do for you first.
Absolutely.
My staff recently are always just like, I'm not sure if they got it from me or I got it from them, but you do you.
I love that.
That's what it comes down to. It's like when they're having a bad day and they need some time, you need to do what you need to do to feel better and to make it through to the next day. And that's what's first. And if you don't know what your values are, I think it's time to really sit in that and figure those out. What is important to you and where do you discover them? And I was thinking about this earlier today, and I was like, well, what are those conversations you always have that you're engaged in and want to continue to have? Do our values come out of that? Do they come from experiences growing up and where we pull them from further? So I think it's just all about those connections and experiences we have on where they come from. So it is time for us to take a little mini break in the middle here and talk about the ACA Illinois. As you know, they are our sponsor. And during the first 3 months of the COVID-19 pandemic, the ACA Illinois offered over 5,000 hours of free professional development, collaborative problem-solving meetings, and more for thousands of camp pros across North America. For me, these were great. I definitely took part in a couple of them, and everything that the ACA has put on that I have partaken in, I have absolutely loved and gotten something out of what they've offered. So please check out their next event at acail.org.
So when we talk about moving forwards, for some folks who've been laid off or furloughed, they may have the chance to go back to their job. And you have to ask yourself, can I go back to my job? Do I want to? And is it even an option? For me, it wasn't an option. The job was eliminated and there was no negotiating. It wasn't there anymore, which is fine because organizations have to adapt to move forwards. And I'm grateful to have a way to move forwards now. But I will say that the other day, they shared the first episode of this podcast, which was wonderful and very flattering. And they referred to me as the recent camp director of my camp, which is true. That is a factual statement. And it hit me hard. I was like, oh, yep, that's true. I'm no longer that camp director. And that was really hard for me. And in some ways it's been nice to almost have the Band-Aid ripped off. There was no long goodbye. It was just gone. But it's also strange to know that there was no official closure and that door is just sort of closed and almost, not that the work we did doesn't exist anymore, but that we're just moving in a different direction. And that's something that I've had to wrestle with because we have to move forwards. We can't sit with how things were pre-COVID because they're not going to go back to the way they were. And in many aspects, we don't want them to. We want a better way forward. We can imagine a better way forwards for ourselves. Yeah,
it is hard. And I was thinking about that recent camp director. I was going to be the first camp director. Mm-hmm. And, there's times when I'm not sure, I don't know, that contract was eliminated, just like your position was eliminated. And I don't know if it's going to be back, when it's going to be back. And these questions, they keep coming back to me and they come back to me. And especially as I look at other opportunities, I'm like, well, if that comes available again, do I want it? Will I reapply? Or am I going to find something better that maybe offers a different lifestyle and has so much more opportunity for growth and connection than what I was doing? So it's just kind of like sitting between a rock and a hard place some days.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that when you're laid off, you have to first and foremost take care of yourself. So your immediate needs, whether that be to get, a roof above your head or food on your plate, et cetera, or maybe it's just that you need some time away from social media. And then as you're making these decisions and looking at what's next is setting some goals, but allowing yourself some slowness. I think it can be really damaging when we see the social media posts. And I've referenced this before, like if you don't come out of the pandemic, like a side hustle and all of these other things, like what have you done with your time? Set some realistic goals because if you've had a job, chances are you're going to continue to need one at some point in your life, even if you're able to go for a while without one. So set some goals for where you want to be, allow yourself some slowness and to move through that, and identify your main priorities, similar to Cassie's conquer list. Like set a couple of things. So be like, in the next 3 weeks, I need to update my LinkedIn and a resume, but manageable things.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Manageable. What do you have the capacity for right now when, you're going through all these emotions? And I think I also just want to make sure when we use laid off, for us here in Canada, it would be similar to furloughed.
Yes,
my understanding in the States. We use termination or fired when that would be what's similar to laid off in the US. So just to catch that piece of language there for us so that our listeners have what they need. But yeah, using this time to identify those priorities, I've used it to really kind of build skills and take that time. But I was also thinking about volunteering. Now, I did a lot of my volunteering online, but there have been so many opportunities to volunteer in my local community of like helping with the food bank or different youth programs that, went online, but weren't able to offer a financial gain for their people, but different ways to become connected, especially moving forward. Local camps are looking for help or might be looking for help, and you can volunteer and hold another full-time job into the future. And that can keep you tied to the community, and have that connection to what a lot of us are passionate about, but still have another part of your life, another part of your identity.
Yeah, I love that. I think volunteering is so important, and something that really stuck with me during this pandemic was when somebody puts out a call for volunteers or says, hey, we need help, is to put up your hand, like just be the first person to be like, yep, like I'm in. For me, that was the Slack group. There was like a call for volunteers and I was like, sure, I'm in. Couldn't really navigate my way around Slack, but I figured it out. And that was like a fantastic support system for me and a way to just surround myself with other people, which was good in the moment and then also good to build connections to move forwards with. And that ability to help people was super helpful for me. And for me also, I've been able to surround myself with people through the Camp Mavericks program and just creating that support system of people who understand me and speak the same language.
Yeah, I think that speak the same language is just important. Camp people speak a different language. And we have these traditions that we honor that we talked about earlier episodes, but maintaining those connections, get involved. I found for me, like, weekly connection was important, but I was also thinking about accountability partners, people who can help you stay accountable and maintain that consistency and check in with each other on a regular basis. But you can't do it without putting yourself out there. So you got to be the one to raise your hand.
Yeah, and people have been so supportive of that through this time. And I think it's really speaks highly to the camping community that people are so willing to call on folks and be like, all right, now's your chance to step up.
Yeah, definitely. And it really helps. And just by asking too, like, I know for me, it's just like, hey, what can I do to help? Where do people need that assistance? And find opportunities.
Yeah, and that creates great connections as we move forward, and also might create some great connections when we're looking for jobs outside of the camp world as well.
Yes.
And I know you've dove into this a ton, Cassie, in terms of like jobs outside of the camp world. For me, it's always been like a daunting thing. Like, how do I translate my skills over to this? But the things that have often come to mind are like program coordination and working with other nonprofits, because I work with nonprofits in the camping world. And so I had like looked at options like that when I was looking to gain more experience outside of the camp world. And that's not to say that I was going to leave. And I think often I had thought like if I chose or took a job outside of the camp world, that I would be closing that door forever. And as we talked about with volunteering and being involved, it was easier for me to see that I could just take this like slightly different path, gain a bunch of skills, and then come back into the camp world, still holding on to those connections. And our communities have incredible needs right now that as camp folks, we often are in a fabulous position to serve. Camp pros have great customer service skills. They're hardworking, they're driven, they're empathetic. There's a long list of qualities that camp pros hold in high regard. And so I think there's great ways to be able to say, like, what does my community need and how can I fill those needs right now?
Yeah, definitely. Like I have dove deep into looking at jobs outside of camp just because there are none. Like, let's be honest, there's some e-counselors out there. But I've thoroughly considered those as well. But when I was looking at it, I was like, okay, so I know how to manage a nonprofit. And I would say I can do that fairly well. And business operations, I have a good understanding of human resources, of marketing. We have a lot of skills, and these skills are valuable to any number of businesses, whether they're nonprofit or profit. But I also found like some tourism is starting to open up, and our skills as camp professionals could be really helpful there, especially in adventure tourism. Depending on where you are, things are starting to open, and they're going to need people with skills that are able to have conversations and to hold a professional conversation with a client. That alone is a skill in itself that not every person has.
Yeah, and especially as folks are coming out of this incredible time of social isolation, when you're going to take folks into the backcountry or up on a ropes course, people are going to have a need to talk. We've been through a lot. There's a lot to unpack here, as we're doing in this episode and in this podcast. And those great skills that you learn at camp of how to hold engaging conversations are going to be so important.
Yeah, and it has me thinking like all of this and like, where did I get these skills and why do I understand these as skills? And thinking about mentors or the people I looked up to in the industry as I was moving through camps. But where are those mentors? Who is my mentor now? And who am I looking to now for that support?
Yeah, it's a challenging thing as we go through this time that nobody else has ever walked through before. So like we can turn to our mentor and be like, so the last time you were in a pandemic, what did you do? Because that just doesn't exist for any of us. And for me, I know what's been helpful is to put myself out there and be like, I'm looking for a mentor. And if I have somebody in my life who I really look up to, and I feel like I can really connect with, is saying, hey, this is what I'm looking for right now. Like, I'm looking for guidance. I'm looking for advice on this. Do you have 10 minutes to chat? Know what you want out of your mentor and then ask them for that. Most camp folks are very keen to help somebody else out, to help mentor somebody, or even somebody outside of the camp world. But think about it. Look into yourself, and it can be challenging, and say, where do I need help? Where do I feel like I need guidance? Put that into words and then give that to somebody, whether you hand it to them, whether you say to them, say, this is what I'm looking for, and this is where I would like your guidance.
Yeah, I think I even saw it on a Facebook group. I don't know if it was Summer Camp Pros or another one I'm a part of, but somebody explicitly asking, hey, I'm moving into this field, and it had to do with outdoor rec in some way, and I'm looking for a mentor. If you're interested, let me know.
It was the Women in Camp Summit group, and I was super impressed by somebody who's just bold enough to be like, I'm looking for a mentor who can help me. This is what I need. And I was like, this is what we need. Like, let's build intentional relationships, ask for what we want. And then if you have those skills, offer them up, even if it's just like 10 minutes once a week to chat.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm like, just talk to people in your field. They might not be the person that's your mentor, but they might know somebody who could be that mentor for you. And be willing to go outside of camp as well, right? Because I'm thinking like, if my mentor is another camp professional, they're going to have great resources for me within the camp world, but maybe I should have somebody who's really great in business operations, who can mentor me on that side, and make sure you kind of put together your basket of people who can best support you and that you can go to for specific pieces of support. Yeah,
by no means do you have to have only one mentor. And the other piece of advice that I feel like I've learned over the years with mentors is not to put them on a pedestal. I feel like I've often really looked up to people, and we're all human. And eventually our mentors, the people we look up to, either do something we disagree with or make a mistake. And when you've put them on a pedestal, it's really hard to watch them fall. So remember that they can give you great advice, that they've walked these paths before us, and we can really look up to them while still understanding and really appreciating their humanness and their wholeness, and that they're going to make mistakes, and that you're not going to see eye to eye necessarily with everything. And that's also totally okay.
Yeah. And I think that's just so important, especially through this time. Like, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to maybe say something the wrong way, but use it as a learning opportunity. And I think as we grow as professionals as well, our view and opinions might begin to differ from our mentor. And that can become an even greater opportunity to have some of those harder conversations.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one thing that our mentors can help us with is helping us look at like transferable skills. So looking at like, what do we do in the camp world, and how can we transfer this to another place? And so when you talk about finding like mentors in the business world, I think that can be super helpful, because you can sit down and be like, wow, I'm great at managing like 22-year-olds and 40 screaming 8-year-olds. And they'll be like, oh, so you have great management skills and team building skills and conflict resolution. And you're like, oh, those are the words I was looking for.
Yes. Break it down. What do we actually do?
Exactly. Something that's been really helpful for me, honestly, was Googling LinkedIn and resume words, because that gave me some ideas of words that actually apply to me. So not just like copying and pasting what you find on your Google searches, but taking some of them, being like, oh yes, that relates directly to this. So something I've done is create some brain maps, or like mind maps that you used to do in grade 4, where you like put down a couple of your skills that you do at camp, and then start to pop in those words and think of other words like all around those, and just like a simple graphic on the computer or handwritten. It sounds really simple, but it was really effective for me to start to think about what those skills were and how I could transfer them to other places.
Yeah, I love brain maps or mind maps, whatever you want to call them. They're great. I do them all the time. Whether it's planning for, hiring or planning for staff training, that's how I start everything, as a mind map. All of my thoughts on a piece of paper, and it just makes so much more sense. I think it's just really important to note that so many camp professionals I feel like we're sometimes niched into, we're really good at programming, but we're really good at a lot of other things as well. Because as Rachel was mentioning, we do more than just develop a program. We manage businesses. We develop marketing content, especially for people in smaller camps. Where you're the only person, you do a lot more. We're responsible for the marketing campaign. We're responsible for coaching our staff and even recruiting them. Where do we find these people? Right? We are the ones who do that all, and finding the words to share with people outside of camp in a way that makes sense to them, especially if they don't need camp, will help you be more successful in the transition.
Oh, for sure. And the key is like, this is a huge transition time, and there's so many things that can help us through that. And mentors are such a huge part of that. And then labeling those transferable skills, giving ourselves confidence in ourselves is also super helpful.
Yeah, I would say practice saying those words as well.
For sure. Something else that's been really helpful during this time, I think, is professional development. I know you and I have chatted quite a bit through this.
Yeah.
So for me in the past, professional development has looked like canoe courses, ropes courses, like the really hard skills side of things. And so I've started to look at like, what free resources are there out there? Like, what webinars can I be taking? Can I be taking courses that aren't related to camp, just like things that I'm interested in? For me, at any time, but especially during this time, if I'm going to spend money on it, I want to know that there's going to be like a good return on my investment, that I'm going to take this and like actually walk away with something that's going to make a difference in my life. So for me, if I'm going to spend money on professional development, I want it to be like recommended by somebody who I like know is knowledgeable, who says like, wow, I took this course and like, here are the deliverables from that.
Which is, I think that's so important to note for anything you're going to spend your own money on, or your business's money on, when you're looking at professional development. Through this time, everything I did was free. I was on too many webinars, to say the least, a lot of them around virtual facilitation and programming virtually. But then I also just did some online courses, one through Penn State on teaching for forests, which was quite interesting. I learned a lot about silviculture, to say the least. But then somebody shared with me the website Coursera, and I found a financial accounting fundamentals course, which was great, as I'm the treasurer for the board I sit on, and it gave me enough skills to be successful moving forward in that. But then I've just been listening and reading to so many things, probably too many things, but loving Seth Godin and Simon Sinek right now.
And I'm actually taking Seth Godin's Alt MBA. I start in a couple of weeks' time. I'm really excited and really thrilled for this because it's so different than something I would have ever done before, and it came highly recommended to me. And so I had an opportunity to take it, and I applied, and I'm super excited because it's different, and I'm really looking forward to the chance to connect with people outside of the camping world. I love camp people. They'll forever be my people. But I'm really thrilled to engage with people who are architects, business folks, doctors, just to see what else is out there. I think sometimes we don't even know what's out there as we're looking for what's next. And we look at this little tiny narrow lens of camp, which for me, it sometimes feels like it's narrowing as we look at this summer, just because, as we've said, not a lot of places are hiring. And looking at like how we can expand that, like how can we diversify camps in every way? And I think this is such a fabulous way to start to look at that.
I think that's a great point to kind of wrap up on. How can we diversify our businesses and ourselves to be better, more employable, everything? And it's that next step. Maybe that's the direction our compass is pointing us in.
I think so. And I think that fits really well with the name of our podcast, Beyond Camp. Like, this is our time to look at what's camp, what's beyond, and how do we bring it all back together.
Oh, yes, done. Let's just end it there. But we like to wrap up every episode with our recharge station. Self-care is critical to personal wellness in the good times and the difficult times. It is also something we as camp professionals struggle with. How do you charge your batteries? What makes you feel inspired? Rachel?
For me these days, it's my morning routine. So that's walking the dog at 6:30 in the morning, sitting down with a cup of coffee, reading through the news, and then getting on with the day. But that 45 minutes of my time is super important to me and very grounding for me.
For me, it was about accountability and social connection, which are both very important to me. And early on, I was like, I want to read some books. And man, it was a struggle. So I started a book club with a bunch of friends. I reached out, said, hey, I want to read this book. Anybody want to read it with me? And we meet every other week, and we're accountable to 60 pages. It's great. It takes us a long time to read a book, but we get through it. Thank you for joining us beyond camp. We hope that you were able to connect and reflect with us as we journey beyond the property lines and bring camp with us. As we wrap up, we want you to be able to reach out and connect with us. You can reach myself, Cassie, at cassie.bloy@stefanricard.ca. Rachel, how can our listeners connect with you?
They can send me an email at kentr@girlguides.ca.
So please be sure to check out our show notes and all of the amazing links that are in it this week at gocamp.pro/beyondcamp. We also like to wrap up with a final thank you to the Go Camp Pro team for holding space for these conversations, to the team at ACA Illinois for their sponsorship and continued support of this idea, for our producer Matt for reminders about how long we are really talking, and to you, our listeners, for making the time to listen. Your dedication allows us to keep moving forward and to have these conversations. Beyond Camp is part of the Go Camp Pro podcast network. Check out all our other podcasts at gocamp.pro/podcast. Go well and safely, friends. We'll be here with you next week.
Thanks for tuning into this episode. Beyond Camp is a part of Go Camp Pro and the Go Camp Pro podcast network. Find a podcast for camp professionals of every age and stage at gocamp.pro/podcast. Thanks for listening, friends.
Hey, Camp Pros. We love that our industry is built on sharing. In order to foster that spirit, if you've gotten even one good idea from a Go Camp Pro podcast, masterclass, from the Summer Camp Professionals group, a conference, or wherever else, we ask that you give credit where credit is due. That way, it'll encourage camp pros to keep freely sharing their ideas and make the camp industry as a whole better.
Hey, it's Travis. Camp directors often tell me they're just too tired to take on anything new. That's exactly why my free Resilient Camp Blueprint Diagnostic exists. It doesn't add work, it shows you progress. Quick, free, repeatable, you'll know if your systems are paying off without the guesswork. Try it today at camp.mba/Travis. That's camp.mba/Travis.